Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody to today's Nonprofit Net Zoominar on how to ask for a gift in the age of Zoom. I'm Dennis Boyer, the board president of Nonprofit Net. It's still tax filing season. We just got our refund, but other people are still working on it. And so if you are reviewing your past year's charitable gifts, let's also focus this year. NPN needs your support to help keep our Zoominars open to everyone without charge. After all, we have expenses to bring them to you. So we hope you'll consider supporting us with a suggested donation of $10 or $20, perhaps even more. And I'll be sending you a link to our donation page with the Zoom chat. We'd also like your feedback because it helps us plan future programs and it's important to our speakers. So along with the donation links, I'm going to send out a survey link as well. Now, on to today's presentation. Some donors still are not comfortable meeting with you in person, and yet that's been the best way to interact with them during COVID. So if you're one of the many fundraisers who don't quite know what to do in this situation, you have come to the right place for practical advice from Major Gifts guru, Diane Remin. Diane, over to you.
Thank you, Dennis, and welcome everyone. I see a couple people I know, and those of you I don't. Nice to get to know you over the next hour. I'm gonna go right ahead and share my screen. And get us into presentation. And here we are. As you can see from the subheader, I'm also going to spend a little time today potentially reframing what fundraising is about for some of you, because if you think you're engaging in some sort of painful extraction exercise, you're not going to want to go visit with donors no matter what I say. We're going to jump right in with a technique. This is a very technique-oriented session. The operative word is practice, practice, practice. And we're going to have to pretend a little bit because it's all technique, meaning we're going to start right out with one of the 2S techniques that you will be learning today. For those of you who like an agenda, there will be an agenda, but not quite yet. And so what I'm asking you to pretend is that you're toward the end of the donor conversation. You've been talking about your organization and even more importantly, understanding more about how the donor story connects in there, what of the donor's interests, passions, and beliefs intersect with what you do. You've probably presented some funding priorities. You've asked permission to talk about your funding plan, which hopefully has some goals and examples of impact. And you've now arrived at the moment where you're ready to, quote, present the opportunity or make the ask. So that's where we are. This first technique I'm going to share is tried and true. It is Zoom and in-person independent, as both techniques are. It's really in setting up the visit where the age of Zoom will have the most impact. So this technique is used far and wide. Universities, hospitals, consultants teach it. And it's very straightforward. It's one of the few sentences I am going to ask you to learn. And why it's effective is that the language just kind of goes right down. There's nothing for the donor to bump against. And here it is. If you were going to ask me or your donor, but we'll use me for this training session, for a gift, it would sound like this. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support your nonprofit? And it is the word consider that works so well. So this is a workshop. I can read lips. On 3, ask me for a gift for $10,000. 1, 2, 3, go.
Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support Fenway Health?
Good. And so we had those of you who were muted. We probably all want to mute because otherwise we are potentially going to have a jumble. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And now let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, go. All right. And for those of you who learn best by writing, and in fact, it's really good practice for everyone, let's put it into the chat. Let's light up the chat. I'll say it one more time. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support your nonprofit? Into the chat, please. There we go. Lots of different nonprofits here. That's terrific. Anybody else? There we go. Super. Okay. All righty. And the only variation on this specific amount ask is you may have done some donor research and determined it makes sense to ask this particular donor for a multi-year gift. In a capital campaign, it's often 5 years. For a more programmatic campaign, 3 years is more typical. So I'll be using the 3-year example today. And that sounds like, so Diane, would you consider a gift of $15,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $45,000 to support your nonprofit? A little more of a mouthful. And conceptually, what are we doing that's key? We've probably determined that this donor is accustomed to giving gifts of $15,000. So we always want to put the annual amount first. We want to be clear on the number of years. And even though the math is simple typically, we want to do the math because otherwise the donor's brain is going to go off to do it, and we want the donor to be listening. So I'm going to say it one more time. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $15,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $45,000 to support your nonprofit? All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3, go. All right. Let's try that one again. All right, without the prompt. It's the number, it's the annual amount, the number of years, the total. 1, 2, 3, go. Great. For the lips I was reading, you did it well. And voila, you now know how to make an ask one way. That is the most classic ask for a specific amount. And just to finish off this section, once you make your ask, no matter which technique you're using, you then want to be quiet, or otherwise you're negotiating against yourself. And what you can do during that time is to pay attention to how the donor is responding, right? Watch their nonverbals. It's a nice thing to do to keep you busy. And to give context for a full quote donor visit, what we have on the vertical is the number of minutes. And the point I want to make is that most of the visit time is really spent in conversation, hopefully with the donor, understanding the donor's interests, beliefs, and how they come together with what your priorities are these days, discussion of impact of the gift we'll have. And then we get here to the actual ask, which you see is like a teeny tiny portion of the whole equation. And now the agenda. So we've done Ask Technique 1. I'm going to spend a little time, again, what may be a reframe of fundraising for some folks, hopefully getting you more comfortable with the concept if you're new at this. We'll then go to setting up the donor visit, a second Ask Technique, and then depending on the time, what do you do when you've asked and the donor says, let me think about it, or let me talk to my spouse, or whatever have you. So that's where we're heading. Thought I'd begin with, well, what is a major gift? And it really depends on your organization. I typically advise my clients to be looking at $2,500 and up, because it's a process to set up the visit and have the visit, whether it be in Zoom or in person, and do the follow-up, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's a tendency to want to take $1,000 donors who definitely should be attended to. Anyone who sent you $1,000, hop on the phone, they're sending you a signal, you want to find out more, but they well may be mid-level donors in your overall system. So I guess I want to say, really do distinguish mid-level donors from, quote, who are going to be your major donors. I also want to take a moment on why individual donors give, often working with organization that's largely grant funded, very different here. There are lots of studies using MRIs. Donors, individual donors give based on emotion. This is a statement of fact. It's not to say they ignore data and your numbers. They want to have context for their gift. Are they giving into $1 million organization or a $10 million organization? How big are you? Are you going to be a good steward? Are you operating in the black, etc.? But the driver's emotion, which is why you hear so much about storytelling in the nonprofit space, right? For the last number of years, storytelling, which is great. You want to be able to tell your organization's story in a way that does drive that emotional hook. But we don't want to forget, and I think what does get forgotten, is there really two stories in play. And so much of your donor conversation really wants to be around, well, what is your donor story? Beyond even, why did they make the gift? Is this issue, does it impact their family or friends in some way? What's been their most favorite philanthropic gift they ever made? Like, what's important to this donor from multi dimensions? And I also want to say that if we look at the skills you need to make major gifts, this is the list. We're going to add technique to it, but you don't see things like you need to be assertive, or you can't be introverted or anything like that. There are lots of different kinds of people who are very successful doing major gift work, because this is the key: skill set plus practice and technique. So I'd like to focus for a moment on the word persistence. And I'm going to ask the question and ask you to respond into chat with which part of the whole process, once you've done it once at least, and so you're used to having the donor conversation, which part of the process do you think you're going to find most challenging over time? Which part of the whole process, from soup to nuts, do you think is going to require your persistence? Let's guess into chat. Getting donor to initially talk with me, getting in the door, following up after maybes. Any others? Okay. I think what you're going to find is that, in fact, it is setting up the visit that is the most challenging part of the process once you're accustomed to the process itself, and you've started to have donor conversations. You see me once again being language sensitive here in terms of what it is we're doing. I also want to emphasize that prior to COVID, major gift work was done in person. Occasionally there'd be a donor who wouldn't visit in person, who would actually make significant gifts with a phone relationship, but that was relatively rare. What we saw was that if donors wouldn't visit with you in person, they typically were not going to be making a significantly increased gift based on a phone conversation. Again, some exceptions. But COVID really tossed this into the air. I'm fortunate in that I do work with some groups of nonprofits, so I could be training 8 to 10 nonprofits at a time in addition to one-on-ones. And what that gave me was a data set. And of course, I've been reading the results out in the world and in the consulting community. And what we've seen is a significant total adaptation to Zoom visits. What we don't know is where this is going to go from here. We can only guess that there's going to be a mix. Some donors who used to visit in person may now prefer to visit on Zoom now that they've seen that. Some donors may want to mix, and other donors are going to want to go back to in person once that's possible. I also want to say that unless you are comfortable, don't be offering in-person visits, right? We need both parties comfortable for in-person. So if you're not comfortable, you don't want to be putting that out there. What I'm going to do now is stop the share. And before I show you the slides, which will explain what I did, I'm going to do it. And to be clear, Dennis at Nonprofit Net will send you the presentation at the conclusion. Presentation has a number of slides with a lot of text, and that's because I'm giving you actual potential dialogue.
That is correct, Diane, just to confirm.
Right. So let's see, a lot of people I can't see. So Dennis, how about I use you as my donor so I have someone to talk to? Are you willing to be my sample donor?
Sure.
Great. So what we're going to do is this is the case, and we're going to go through a couple different cases. This is a case where I have spoken to Dennis to the point when he hears my name, he is going to know who I am. And so we've had previous conversations, be it on the phone, be it in person, be it wherever. And so what you're going to hear is the setting up the Zoom visit. Peter, do you mind muting with the donor, you know? So, and we're going to assume we get him on the phone. And yes, I will talk about what happens when you don't get the donor on the phone. All right. Ring, ring, Dennis.
Hello.
Hi, Dennis. This is Diane Remin from ABC Nonprofit. How have you been?
Not too bad considering. Yourself?
Likewise, fortunate to report. It's due to circumstances, it's been a while since we've had a chance to chat, and I'd love to share some of our plans and see what you think. Turns out we've had many thoughtful conversations on Zoom lately. So I'm wondering if we can set up a Zoom visit. How would March 23rd at 2 or the 24th at 11 be?
I would take the 24th at 11, I think would work with me. Little, not great experience with Zoom, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Super. I will send you a Zoom link and a calendar invite and look forward to visiting with you on the 24th at 11. So Dennis did make it easy for me. which is fine. I'm going to now share my screen and talk about technique-wise what I was doing, because I was doing some very specific things. In all of the invites to set up the visit, the goal is always to get the donor to the calendar. The actual dates you're providing, you do need to be available, but they're red herrings in that you don't really care if they're free on those dates. If they happen to be free on those dates, great. But once the donor's to their calendar, success, you have victory, right? That's what we're doing. The language that I have found very effective for a Zoom visit is this sentence: we've had many thoughtful conversations over Zoom lately. It normalizes Zoom. It lets the donor know that the conversations have been meaningful. And I think it just captures all the kinds of things that we'd want to express as a setup to the invitation. And so that is language that I do recommend. You can see in the little box here on the right, the case for the donor you used to visit in person, and you can see acknowledging that. And now if you're not ready to go back in person, again, using this, we've had many thoughtful conversations over Zoom lately language. If the donor doesn't want to do Zoom, then call is the backup. But major gift work over phone is a challenge. So you can, and also if they don't want to do Zoom, but they want to do FaceTime or they want to do some other medium, that's fine too. You're preferring where you can share your screen usually, because often you will want to be showing them a part of your case or support, but it is what it is. Let me also note that for smaller nonprofits that are national, Zoom has opened up an opportunity that didn't exist. And that is, you don't always have to get on a plane. Again, pre-COVID, as a consultant, and the consulting world sort of used to joke around about, we should just put on our answering machines or our voicemail response. The answer is yes, get on the plane, right? One of the most common questions we get asked: do I really have to get on the plane? And the answer was yes, you did. If it was typically, we'd advise if you were asking for a gift of $10,000 more, you'd want to get on the plane. I'm letting someone in here, Dennis. There we go. And
Diane, you're now muted.
okay, there we go. So the fact of Zoom is that for some organizations, it's going to make it possible for you to reach out to donors who you could not otherwise reach out to, and go for it. If in person beyond a very small local area doesn't work for you, then yes, Zoom. Just to contrast for the language with an in-person visit, instead of suggesting Zoom, you're suggesting home or office. Again, this goes back pre-COVID. So if you're suggesting an in-person visit, home or office, wherever is most convenient, and then your backup is Zoom. What happens if it's a donor that you don't know well or at all? Maybe you've done some well screening or other donor research, and let's pretend you found some smaller donors giving you $100, $200, and you see that they have the financial ability to give you more, and potentially you've seen some of their other philanthropy, so you know they're philanthropic. What do you do then? And so we say predispose, meaning get the donor ready for your call. And how do we do this? We suggest that whoever the appropriate person would be, maybe the executive director, lets the donor know via either snail mail or email, depending on your donor base and your donors, to let you know that you're going to be making a call. And then what are you doing? You're just getting on the phone saying, hi, I'm following up on the note you received from whoever the referral source was. Ironically, this process here of when you don't know the donor is actually almost simpler because they've gotten an email, maybe they remember it, maybe they don't, and you're saying, hey, I'm following up on this call and can we set up a visit? And if it's direct to Zoom, you're just offering direct to Zoom. Only if it were that simple. It's not. It's not. So how do we balance persistence and pestering? And there's no hard research on that. There's only the fact that we know to advise you to keep at it for up to 12 months. And I recommend in series, so you're not bothering them once a week. And why do we say 12 months? I have heard, and it's anecdotal, but by now, a lot of stories, and experienced this myself, someone just doesn't respond for a very long time, for months. And I just had a client of mine, one of their major donors like vanished, right? It almost felt like they were ghosted, although it turned out it wasn't permanent. At month 10, because I said, keep every couple of months, be in touch. At month 10, reappear. Turned out the donor had been ill. Or the person could be traveling and just or who knows what's going on in their life, that they're just so busy right then, they can't pay attention to you. It doesn't mean they don't ever want to. It means they can't for an extended period of time. So the answer is yes, keep at it. And here's a tip. Tip is new. I just added it in the last month because there's one of the consultants out there is trying this. So this is an anecdotal tip, but it kind of makes sense to me. So let's pretend you're at around month 6, 7, and you've been contacting this person by various means, haven't gotten a visit yet. Suggestion is to send a content-only email or direct mail through the mail piece. That's nothing about setting up a visit. It's just content. Anyone ends up trying this and has feedback, let me know, because this is kind of being tested now out in the field. But again, it makes sense to me that it might be effective, at least with some people, to change up, right? Change the communication. And again, I'd say at like the 12-month point, I might put this person sort of as, we couldn't qualify them, they didn't express interest, and keep certainly sending them what you'd send anyone who's connected to your organization, but pull them from your active list. So what happens had Dennis pushed back a little bit and said, well, Diane, what's this going to be about? And almost no matter what Dennis said back to me, I'm going to fall back to these concepts, which is it's important that we know what the people who are important to us think about, what we have in mind, and then kind of re-ask. But if you ask for in-person, initially repeat. If you ask for a Zoom, initially repeat. And if I'm getting resistance, I might limit then the amount of time. I didn't in the first go around, but the second go around I might. And I might say, look, Dennis, 30 minutes will do it. How about we Zoom? But that's the concept. And I'm giving you some specific examples here about what happens if you get like a time objective. I'm going to be out of the country, or my daughter's getting married in 2 months, or whatever it may be. Timing is always responded to by accommodating the donor. Even if you have to set up something 6 months out, that's fine. And then you can see the responses for the mail and for, are you going to ask me for money, which actually you won't get asked as often as you might think. Given the amount of information I'm covering today, I am going to zoom through this. And move on to the second close. So I'd like to ask you again to use chat. And the question is, when are you most likely to be hesitant about asking for a gift? Is it when you know the donor really well, family member, friend, close colleague, when you're acquainted, or when you hardly know the donor or don't know the donor at all? When are you likely to be most hesitant to do that traditional ask? And we hear, know the donor really well, close family and friends, probably when I know them well. Number 3, when you hardly know. When I don't know the donor, hardly know. Right. It's an interesting situation, all of these. And in fact, the clueless close was created to accommodate, in particular, when you hardly know and when you know the donor well. I also want to give credit to the SUDS group for impact.org who created this close. I also want to note that this close has its detractors. Some folks would not accept this as a close because it's going to use a range. And I will, when I get to the end of this section, suggest when to use the ask for a specific amount and repeat when to use the clueless close. So I just want to put out there that I and my clients have found this close very effective because it gets people out there willing to make an ask when they might not be ordinarily, but it's not universally accepted. So with that said, and just actually one more thing. So the 4 impact group that created this, where they're coming from philosophically is meeting your donor where they are today. And that is in contrast to the idea of we should get to know the donor really well before we initiate the first ask. So they're really 2 different schools of thought. So what do you need to do this close? It's a 3-part close. It requires a little more. The other quote downside is you have to land 3 elements. The other close, 1 sentence, straightforward. You're asking for a specific amount. You do need a case for support that has some funding priorities. In other words, what do you want the donor to fund? And you want to include some examples of a goal and gifts at each level. And what you must have is a leadership giving range in order to make this close. So you need to be providing the donor or have provided the donor with some examples at varying amounts. The range can differ. Like it depends on your donor base. If you have donors where 2,500 to 25,000 makes sense for your leadership giving range, that's fine. If you have donors where 50,000 to 500,000 makes sense, that's fine. The range should align with who your donors are, but you need one. And again, imagine that we're way out in the conversation, right? We've already had the conversation, catching up with the donor, reconfirming and learning more about why they're interested in this work. We've presented them with some priorities and described the goal and the gifts we're looking for, and once already stated the leadership giving range. It's also very highly recommended, always independent of this close or any other close, that when you arrive at the point in your conversation with your donor where you want to talk about the goals and the funding plan and the gifts and the impact, that you get permission to do that, just as general technique. But especially if we're going to ask a donor that we don't know that well for a gift, we really want to have gotten their permission to discuss the funding plan, and that same applies for family and friends. Most of the time you'll get it okay, but you really want to know if the person is not feeling comfortable about hearing about the funding, which they can then figure out is going to lead them likely into an ask. Then you stop earlier in the conversation, and that is totally fine. You thank them for their time. So there are 3 parts to the close. The first part, and I'm going to do an example for you in a second. The first part is to acknowledge the situation, be it that you're good friends, or you're my cousin, or you're my sister, or whatever it may be, or the opposite side. I know this is the first time we're visiting together. Sharing that I don't know exactly where to go from here, because you don't know exactly where to go from here, because you either don't know them well, or you know them very well and you don't want it to be awkward. You're going to restate, again, you said it earlier, your leadership giving range. As we've discussed, our leadership giving range is from 10,000 to 100,000. And then you still are going to make an ask, which is going to sound like, so tell me, Peter, where do you see yourself? And then, as always, you're silent, right? You're going to wait for them to talk. So let me stop share. And if anyone who has their camera on, if anyone wants to raise their hand and be the donor, I'll call on you. Okay, Ned. I saw that one first. You can, hi, Ned, thanks.
Hi there.
So Ned, since you chose to be our first example, do you want to be someone I'm meeting for the first time, meaning I hardly know you, and let's pretend, because we've talked about in the age of Zoom, where we've been having a Zoom visit, or do you want to be someone I know well?
I think the former.
Okay.
You don't know me, so let's try it.
Okay. So again,
I don't think you know me anyways.
I don't think so either.
Unless you've done your research.
So again, just as a reminder to everyone, we're pretending that Ned and we've probably been talking for 30 to 40 minutes. I've gotten his permission to discuss the funding plan. I've reviewed the funding plan, meeting the goal for the initiatives, some examples of impact, and the leadership giving range. So he's heard all that already. And now here we are. So Ned, I am just thrilled with your enthusiasm around the work of ABC Nonprofit. I want to acknowledge that, gee, this is our first time Zooming together. I don't know exactly where to go from here, but I certainly want to give you the opportunity to make a difference here if you'd like to. As we've discussed, our leadership giving ranges from 10,000 to 100,000. If you'd like to participate, Ned, where do you see yourself?
Well, I guess I'd like to see the pyramid of your prospective donors. I'm not aware of ABC, as we've discussed. I do hear about the impact that you're having. But where are the majority of your donors?
Okay, I'm gonna stop here, and I would not be sort of giving him names. I might letting him know how much we typically raise, etc. But I think that the question of the ask is, for everyone listening, and for you too, Ned, did that sound comfortable at acknowledging the situation? That's really the idea here, is the acknowledgement that we've just met. That said, if the person's not enthusiastic during the conversation, we don't want to do this close. I've gotten his permission. And these days, given how busy everyone is, oftentimes people will give on the first visit. Again, this is counter what some folks how some folks approach this. You probably are not getting your maximum gift. If you do it this way, you're working your way up. But that's the idea, is to really acknowledge it, the situation. And then you heard me even soften the ask further by saying, if you'd like to participate, no pressure. It is completely no pressure. And it is through the acknowledgement of the situation that the donor then typically feels comfortable and may or may not make a gift then, as the case may be. All right, let's try. Who would like to try the other side where I know you well? Same concept, just slightly different for Laura. Okay, Laura. So Laura raised her hand first. So who are we good friends? That work? Okay. And again, we've been talking now 30, 40 minutes or more. We're way at the end with all the permissions. So Laura, I don't know, we've known each other, where are we up to, 2 decades? Yeah. And we've never had such an in-depth conversation about ABC. I'm just thrilled to learn, how enthusiastic you are about this work and actually how it ties back into some of your family. Had no idea. It's been very exciting to learn all this today. What's important to me is our friendship. I'm not sure exactly where to go here. I do want to give you the chance to make a difference in this space if you'd like to. You've seen our leadership giving goes from 10,000 to 100,000. Again, friendship paramount, all answers fine. Where do you see yourself, Laura? You're muted. I can't hear you. The mute looks off, but I'm not hearing you. Okay, we're not, okay. So again, in listening in, I'm acknowledging the relationship, and she's given 10,000, I think. An immediate success with Laura. I'm acknowledging the relationship, right? It should have felt that was paramount. I honestly don't, she could say whatever she wants. Donors can always say whatever they want. I'm not trying to push at all, ever. I am presenting opportunity. It's why I like doing this work. It's because I am giving the donor a gift, not taking something away. Completely different frame for how some people think about this. So those are the two sides. They both work very similarly. It's a question of authentically acknowledging whichever side of the situation you're on. I don't quite know what to do here, which is true. Reframing, re-saying the leadership giving and asking, and it can be even more gentle than where do you see yourself? You can preamble with all answers fine, or it's a relationship that matters, or if you'd like to participate, again, soft ask so it's comfortable for you, because you are not going to want to do this if you are not going to be comfortable, right? All right, back to share. Thank you, my two donors. So to compare the two techniques, I'd start with a specific ask. It's tried and true, it's easier. And that's where I'd sort of begin. And if you want to do multi-year, you have to do it with a specific amount. You can't do multi-year mushed into the clueless close. Again, I think about the clueless close when you're saying to yourself, this feels kind of like weird, right? I'm feeling awkward about doing this. Clueless close. I want to leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So I am going to zip through the fact that you have in your presentation 2 techniques you can use after the donor says, let me think about it, or I need to talk to my partner, spouse, whomever, etc. I'm going to go to actually feel, felt, found, and give you the spouse example as the one example I'll do with you today, because when someone says to you, I need to talk to my partner or spouse or whomever, what you want to know is who's sort of the money driver. Or is this like a joint effort? Do they just need to run it by the person? That's really what you want to find out. And oftentimes you won't have known to invite a couple to the visit because you've really been communicating with one of them. It's pretty common. It also can be an answer to just buy time, and that's fine too. And so the tip for the speaking to the spouse or the partner is that you want to offer to have the conversation with that person as well. So if I'm using a technique called feel, felt, found, which is wonderful in creating empathy, if someone said to me, okay, Diane, I really need to talk to Steve about this, I'd say, I know how you feel, Mary. Many people I've spoken with have felt the very same way. What we found is that setting up a time to include Steve in the conversation and having me available to answer questions right on the spot works out really well. How about the 3 of us plan to speak on date time? And what I will get back to that is typically either, yeah, that's a good idea. And then that tells me, these decisions are joint. Or I'll get back, no, that's not necessary. I just need to run it by Steve. Tells me it's that kind of relationship. I'm not judging the relationship. I just want to know what kind of relationship it is. And that's an example, and you have some other ones of how to use these techniques. I also want to mention that the donor's reaction, initial reaction, trust your donor research. Hopefully you have researched your donors before you're asking for a gift. And to understand if you're, especially if you're new at this, that, wow, and that's not what I was giving before, and that's more than I was thinking. I regard those as initial reactions. Contrasted with, oh my, Diane, I love the work. I really wish we could do that, but there is just no way. You'll hear it in body language, you'll see it in body language, you'll hear it in voice tone, and you'll often hear the story with it. COVID has just killed the business, or whatever it may be. You then want to see if there's a timing solution. Re-ask at half down, so to acknowledge that they're saying no way, and then you don't want to keep going back and forth. It's what kind of impact is possible for you now. But really what I want to do is caution against jumping right into negotiation based on sort of an active initial response. Because again, if you've done your homework, yes, it will be more than they've been giving likely. And yes, it will be potentially more than they've been thinking, but you want to keep all your own money stuff out of the equation. You don't want to be responding with, yes, that's a big number. The response is always, that kind of gift will really make a difference here, right? Stay out of the land of money, of your own money stuff. And finally, you always want to leave with a next step unless you've gotten all the way to yes, a total yes, I will do X. And then you've said, oh, and how would you like to make that gift? Are you using stocks? Are you using credit card? What do you have in mind? But if you didn't get to yes, which again, with major gift work, we are asking for a bit of a stretch, likely you didn't get to yes. One of the most common calls I get is, gee, Diane, I can't get the donor back to arrange the next step. And I'm like, did you set the next step up at the visit? No. You're going to be chasing, and I know this is counterintuitive, but you're going to be chasing even if the donor wants to make the gift. It's because I think just everyone's so busy, it's just hard to get your hands on people. And so you really, really, really want to set up a time at the end, and you want to record notes right into your database or into Word or into wherever, so the organization knows what you've learned about this donor. And with that, I am going to leave time for questions in the chat. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay, Dennis?
It's on the very last point when a donor just gives like a flat no. No doesn't always mean no. And so probing a bit, can you say, do you mean no? Do you foresee a point at which you might be able to consider or reconsider this? Or, you know, try to find out without being too intrusive what the no, what's behind the no, and if there are future opportunities.
Okay, so this is, what's interesting is just as yes is relatively rare, no is relatively rare if they've taken the visit. The visit itself is a huge screen. Once you get the visit, you are 70 to 80% likely to get an increased gift. And you remember that persistence word? And you remember that slide with all those going back over months? That's the challenging part. But once they take the visit, again, you're usually not going to get a flat out no. If you get one, no, it depends on why. If you've gotten a no because your organization is not one of their priorities, there you are. And then, you know, you thank them and maybe you get permission to be in touch like 6 months down the road. And in fact, one of the techniques we didn't have time to do today is program amount timing, where you take them back up and say, you know, do I have it right that this work is exciting to you? And I think it's that kind of question. If you're just not one of their priorities, again, usually they weed out at the visit level, but if they didn't, or they have a chance to weed out when you say, can I talk about the funding plan? If they say, you know, I really like what you're doing, but I really want to stay put, which is essentially, no, I don't want to talk about the funding plan. Again, you're thanking and you're moving on. No, beyond that, I would, again, trust the research that this donor has capacity and is philanthropic. I would ask for permission, again, out in time, like 6 months out. Would it be okay? I get that it's no, and you will understand a bit through the conversation if they weren't interested in any of the work, right? It should have come out in the earlier part of the conversation. So I would do another round of seeing if they'll visit with you again in 6 months or so, see where we're at then, where you're at then, etc. That's how I would handle the no. Other questions? If you've discovered a donor who gives you 100, also gives 10,000 to the symphony, how do you approach and increase? Okay. How do you approach an increased donation to your org? So this is a common case where using donor research is helpful, because it does point out these smaller donors who are giving a lot more money potentially elsewhere. And so you want to have a quote case for support that outlines these leadership level gifts and what their impact would be. And you want to do this process. You want to see if this donor will visit with you to talk about them. You want to have the conversation. You want to ask for permission to discuss the funding. And then if you hardly know them, you want to use the clueless close. This is exactly what I've gone through today, is one way to do this. The other way is to have an initial, see if they'll have a visit for what I call a getting to know you gift. Getting to know you visit. A getting to know you visit is where you might say to the donor, we'd like to know how to better serve you. I promise we're not making an ask. We really just want to know you better and see if they'll set up a visit so you can learn more about them. And then on the next visit, you would consider actually asking them. Those are sort of the two ways to go about it. Question, what if the donor says, I love ABC, but I want to keep giving at the level I've been giving for the past 10 years? Thank you very much. We really appreciate your support. Is there anyone else you know who you think we should be talking to about ABC? Okay, when to ask for referrals. Thank you for asking this question. If someone says, we want to keep going, we love you, but we're good, referrals. You don't want to ask for a referral while the donor is thinking about making their gift to you. Get them to yes or to no or wherever they're going. Referral question.
Hey, Diane, I'm
Yep.
sorry to intrude, but we're actually at time.
We're at time, so let me do my grand finale. All right, on the count of 3, everyone, you're asking me for $100,000 flat. All right, 1, 2, 3, go.
So Diane, you want it on the chat?
No, I just wanted you to say it muted. All right.
Where do you see yourself here on this in these leadership gifts?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nonprofit Net and Dennis. Practice, practice, practice. I know it's a lot of information, and Dennis will be forwarding it to you. Good luck with your major gift work, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.
Well, Diane, thank you so much. This is just so valuable. And everyone, looking forward to next month's Zoominar. Quickly, you might be surprised at how many nonprofits have difficulty measuring and communicating their social impact. Well, fortunately, Nina Selvaggio is going to be here to help us understand why measuring impact is important, how you communicate it, and how you apply it to your organization. So also on a Tuesday, April 12th, same time, 1 to 2 p.m.
Hold on a minute, please.
And folks, if you could mute yourselves, because we're kind of talking over each other, and I thank you for that. Before you leave, your feedback on today, very important to us and to Diane. We will email you a link to our survey and a link for your support. We hope you can consider, Diane, a gift of $10 or $20 or even more. That helps us keep our events open to everyone without charge. And we'll send you links on how to do that as well. So I thank you. We thank you, Diane, for a wonderful session, and we hope to see you all in April. Goodbye for now.